If you're anything like me, which I sincerely hope you aren't for your own well-being, you'll have a thing for lists. Fortunately, some of these people who love lists as much as I do also ended up writing for game publications in the 90s, and those who didn't made easily shared images that proliferated over the internet instead. The thing is, you can't stick all the great DOS games in one image without it being a huge mess, and opinions vary wildly on what constitutes a great DOS game in the first place. Different strokes for different folks and all that. So I decided in my infinite wisdom to spend weeks of my life constructing a list that collated these other lists. A master list of sorts. One list of DOS games to rule them all, just out of sheer curiosity and to see how many games people considered worthy of playing. The only criteria I had was, hey, did this run on DOS at any point? Then it counts. So ports from the arcades or the Amiga and Atari and even older or newer systems are welcome, as are the games that appeared on both Windows and DOS on the same CD or separately. Turns out that with no stringency, this resulted in a lot of games, more than you could ever hope to complete in a lifetime. And the collated list can be downloaded in the description if you want to shut off this video because you find my voice annoying, and you don't want to know my sources or the efforts I went to in order to cobble together this list. My journey started with the ever-popular 100 Worthwhile DOS Games list, an image post so good that it spawned an entire series on this channel, the perfect base to expand upon. This was supplemented with the 13 games I did videos on for my 100 More Worthwhile DOS Games show. I then added Flynn's excellent curated 300 game list from the Mr. FPGA forums, deleting the many overlapping titles. This was bolstered by It's a Pixel Thing and Techno's 150 Greatest DOS lists, Joseph JYA's 200 Greatest DOS Games, and a selection of the 303 games from Lightwave AI's videos. Links to all these are in the description if you want to watch them. After that, I included any game that had made my own top 25 lists that hadn't already appeared. This was followed by some of the titles from my 45 games on a floppy list to round out older titles from the 80s that might have been otherwise neglected. I didn't select all of these either, as they're not all amazing games, but a good few are essential playing, and they weren't covered by the other lists. V's DOS Gaming list was added and revealed a few more titles that weren't covered by the already extensive compilation, and then it was down to brass tacks and the real historical research began. After all, it's easy to suggest games that have been vetted 100 times over by the internet by players throughout the decades, but what about the publications I talked about before? What about the writers who had to make a judgment call then and there without the benefit of decades-long hindsight? For that, I started with my favourite magazine growing up, PC Gamer UK's Top 100 Games list from 1996, which yielded a few interesting extras that had been overlooked, and then the proverbial goldmine that was Computer Gaming World's Top 150 from the same year. Turns out that the journalists there really liked their war games. To round off the list, I included the most popular games from My Abandonware, Abandonia, and the DOSGames.com website, as well as a few personal favourites somehow not covered already by this sprawling behemoth I had constructed. The end product, after some suspect sorting in my Z text editor, which doesn't like Roman numerals and doesn't deal with anything prefixed with the very well, is a list of 800 DOS games that have all been highly regarded by someone, somewhere. The sheer number is something I plan on making another video about, and there was something else that struck me too. Even as I was reaching the end of this compilation, I was still finding DOS games that had somehow slipped through the net that this gigantic list encompasses. Turns out I'm only human. There's gonna be titles that I've missed, both in niche areas that aren't featured on best of lists and some of the more obvious ones too. All in all, it's confirmation of what I've already discovered over the years of playing DOS games at random. About 1 in every 4 of them will be decent irrespective of what you land on, and 1 in 7 will be an absolute classic. Okay, enough of that. Time for yakety sax and a list being played too quickly to read over the top. What do you mean I forgot Home of the Underdogs? So, quick addendum here. I went to Home of the Underdogs, and I added 160 more games. So it's a list of 960 games rather than 800. Enjoy!